Hi, listener. This is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ego and ideological doctrine in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. Today, I'm interviewing Paul Tokgozolu from the Beyond Homo Sapien podcast and YouTube channel. He discusses psychic abilities, human consciousness, evolution, new technology, future trends, and much more. Hi.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I had a look at your podcast and it looks pretty interesting. So,
Well, I had a look at your podcast and it also looks pretty interesting. So I'm glad that we could do this, man.
yeah, it
Thanks for
seems like there's a sort of common interest there. I mean, other than the fact that we've got spiritual podcasts.
Yeah, I suppose so. These days I feel like this term of spirituality is kind of misunderstood in a lot of ways. For me there is a spiritual aspect to these topics like hermeticism or alchemy or magic or these different topics that I get into. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's a very scientific thing that's happening here. Like this idea that you're talking about, unity, this idea of unity consciousness, that we're moving into this oneness, so to speak, that this understanding that we're all one being. For me, it's not a spiritual thing. It's cold hard fact.
Is there a unity between science and spirituality then?
For sure. I mean, it's all one and the same. So if we are talking about some sort of a collective consciousness or, a hive mind, so to speak, or if we're all talking about us being one cosmic being, then of course, everything is one. So spirituality and science for me are just two ends of the same polarity.
Yeah, for sure. So, what do you think of, say, quantum physics as a bridge between these two things?
I think it's good. I feel like what the quantum physicists are figuring out these days is really just a modern regurgitation of what has been known for thousands and thousands of years. This is stuff that ancient societies and ancient peoples have been studying and thinking about for a long time because all this stuff you're talking about on your show or I'm talking about on mine. Again, it's nothing new. Like these are not new concepts. In fact, they're as old as time.
Hmm.
The more I research, and I'm sure you're finding the same, the older it gets, the older these teachings get,
It goes back
and
at least to the Atlanteans, right?
yeah, exactly. It seems like that whatever teachings we have come to us from some ancient civilization.
Hell, did you know there's a pyramid on Mars?
I didn't know that. I haven't looked into that too much.
Well, they
That's
saw
amazing.
it definitely looks like it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like the more that we are finding, the crazier things get. I mean, look at Gobekli Tepe. They're finding that, the older reliefs, the older carvings are more complicated. That the older they get uncovering Gobekli Tepe, and if the person listening doesn't know what that is, just go Google it. It's a giant megalithic site that is being unearthed in Turkey, really. And the more they dig, they're finding the bigger it gets and the more complicated it gets. And that's in contrary to what we would think. So to answer your question about quantum physics, like I think it's obviously it's a new way of discussing these ideas that have been around since the dawn of time.
All right. So, if quantum physics is basically talking about many of the same things, why hasn't that sort of seeped into the mainstream paradigm, even when it comes to science?
Well, because science and religion, they make this big attempt to be different. That's one of the things that we have in our society or in our world is this idea that spirituality and science are two different things, when in fact they're not. They're identical. That, in my opinion, science validates what the ancient religious teachings have been saying all along. However, the reason why it's not more commonly known, like you're saying, is because these topics are not commonly understood. Most people have never read old books on alchemy or magic or whatever. So I think that there's just a lack of information. There's a lack of, I wouldn't say
Right.
information. There's a lack of there's a lack of people who have put together those different concepts. But
Right. Do you think
that's
it's
really,
just
yeah.
ignorance, or do you think there's something intentional going on?
No, well, I feel like, again, this is something I talk about on my show, is that these topics, they're not secret, but they're kind of a secret of the universe. that people only encounter this information when they're meant to find it. So,
Oh, yeah.
so it's not that anyone is keeping it secret, like any person, but God. So, in quotation marks, the universe, whatever you want to call it, is it these topics only find you when you're ready. So I feel like collectively we're becoming more ready. That's why this is becoming
Right.
more main.
And the problem has been, for whatever reasons, maybe you could say due to deliberate design, there's been, for example, we've got an energy grid, right, on the Earth, right? And
Yeah.
some say that it's been corrupt. It was corrupted at one point, and that actually made it harder for us to have as high frequencies. And maybe that actually meant less people were ready.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a chance that it could have been done by design, but honestly, I don't think so. Like I feel like they're what it's no, like it's that's not been my experience at all
Okay.
because what I've found is that these topics again on their own accord keep themselves secret, so to speak.
Right.
And the topics in general being, occult science in a sense.
You got a good point, because it can kind of distract from conspiracies, can kind of detract from responsibility sometimes, because
Yeah, that's
it gets this victim mentality going,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. So if the evil Illuminati exists and they're behind the scenes pulling all the strings, then what choice, of course you're just going to sit on your ass and do nothing. But no, that's not at all what's happening. Actually, I feel like if there are any controlling interests at the very top, that they'd be split in the same way that humans are split. There is no, I don't think there's some all powerful, quote unquote, evil organization behind the scenes doing all this. No, like for one, that doesn't make sense from a logical perspective because the way that our universe is set up, the way that I believe the laws of reality function, that would not be possible. In a sense that uh, the force of evil, the force of bad or Satan or whatever you want to call it, is intrinsically less powerful than the forces of good. So, in other words, if there were secret societies or secret groups behind the scenes, by nature of how these things function, the good guys would naturally be at the top. They
Doesn't there have to
because
be some sort of balance though? And maybe we need
yeah,
to be tested, and maybe the universe would,
yeah,
or God, whatever, will allow that, so that, I mean, look at everything that's happening now. There's so much negativity and going on
yeah.
right now. Maybe that's a catalyst.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I guess I totally agree with you. I guess I'm just saying I don't think it's some all powerful group behind the scenes doing it. Like no, it's happening naturally. Like for example, the lockdown that people are experiencing. It's self-enforced. It's self-imposed. People are locking themselves down to a large degree all over the world. And people have like you were saying before, it's you can walk around and do whatever even on in countries where they are on a really strict tight lockdown. um there's still the freedom there that you don't have to comply if
So,
you weren't doing it to yourself.
so do you
That
think
was the same thing.
collectively? Oh, pardon me.
You're good.
Do you
That's
think
I mean,
we?
I saw that in the US is like the masks, for instance. Here where I live, people don't wear them. It's not a thing because
Hmm.
we decided collectively here in the Ozarks, unconsciously, it wasn't like we all gathered and had a conversation, but unconsciously the collective mind shifted to say that, this is not something we believe in. This is not something that we comply with or agree with, and then that has become the reality.
It's a mirror principle, isn't it? That the outside world will reflect the inside world. So that might, it maybe there's a link between like the minds of the people where they live and what's going on there.
Absolutely. That's, I believe, how this all functions. But it's not just the people, it's the collective of the entire region,
Hmm.
including the plants, the animals, the rocks. It's all a collective vibration, so to speak. It's a vibrational energy that can be felt, and it works like a magnet to draw in different peoples to that magnet who are attracted to that. And oftentimes, those people are like minded, so to speak, because we're all drawn magnetically into the same region. And then that creates this sort of a collective consciousness, like something that Charles Eisenstein writes about in his book The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible, which is a great book if you haven't read it. He talks about the idea of consensus reality, that we as a collective being, as a collective mind, we come to collective consensus about what our reality should look like. So, for example, in a country where there's a really strict lockdown, that has become the consensus, is that this is what we should be doing for whatever reason.
Right.
And then that becomes real,
Right.
manifest.
Okay. What happens when people are unconsciously consenting, perhaps, to a particular way of things turning out?
That's what's going on right now in the world. I mean, it's always been that way though. I feel like now what's happening here with the virus and all this lockdown business is that it's become more obvious. It's become, but it's always been that way. There's always been what you're talking about, this idea that people are kind of unconsciously consenting to all sorts of things just by being a citizen of the country you're in. You're consenting to what's going on in that country. If you pay taxes, you're consenting to the way the government, like if you, for example, if you pay your taxes, and I'm not trying to say don't pay taxes, it's more just this is how I believe things, this is how things work, is that, if I give my money to the government and through taxes, I give my consent to say, hey, you can use this money how you want. Here it is. It's my tax money. And it's an energetic exchange, but people don't even really think about it. Just by being a US citizen, I am energetically tied to whatever it is that's happening in the United States because I've given my consent as a citizen. I could revoke my consent at any time. I could renounce my citizenship if I wanted to, but I don't want to because I've got a lot of reasons for holding on to that citizenship. But it's a conscious thing. So yeah, that's what people are missing is like people love to bitch and complain and whine about stuff that's happening in their society. Meanwhile, they forget that they are in very, very tied to that, just energetically through all these ways that you're, consenting, really.
So is the world changed energetically? These connections, are they changed by the fact that we have the internet now?
Yes, I believe that 100%. That I wouldn't say changed, I'd say magnified, or again, made
Oh,
more obvious. So, for example, I think humans have always been telepathic. We've always been telepathically connected to one another. And we just didn't realize it until the internet. The internet, like if you're going on social media, you're literally reading people's thoughts. It's literal telepathy, really. Like we don't think of it like that because uh we consider our phones or the internet as separate from ourselves. But when you have this idea that everything is one, you gotta say like this candle next to me is a part of me in a sense, and that the internet, this form we're talking over Zoom right now, this is a part of us. It's a part of the collective being of this hive mind, the all that we all live in. And obviously you're different. You are your own sovereign being. I'm my own sovereign being, but what we're linked in the sense that we have this divine spark within us that ties us together.
yeah.
So just go back to your question, like, I think that stuff like the internet, it just magnifies what already is. It makes it more obvious. So now we can have this sort of a conversation where we're speaking to each other over the internet. There's invisible waves that are connecting us to each other from the other side of the world.
Mhm.
You're on the other side of the ocean right now, which is wild. It's crazy. And here's the thing is that let's say hypothetically, we had someone from the Amazon rainforest came in, someone who's never seen technology like this, and they witnessed this conversation. They just walked into my room for some reason, somehow, and they saw you and me speaking to each other like this. And it would be almost impossible for me to explain to them what was happening and how you and me were, oh, he's over on the other side of the ocean, but we're having a live conversation. To them, it would appear, oh, so they're chatting through magic. They're telepathically communicating. If we were texting each other on the phone, we wouldn't be speaking, right? But my words would show up in the palm of your hand. It's a form of
Mm.
telepathy,
Does
in
it go
my
the
opinion.
other way though? Because potentially, what if they have the sort of connection to nature and each other that we might not have now?
I totally agree, man. I feel like that's again going back. Like the more I disconnect from technology, the more the telepathic connection is enhanced. And I
Mm.
feel like that really, yeah, you're spot on with what you just said. These intrinsic telepathic or psychic abilities that we have are bogged down by our environment that we've created for ourselves. And as soon as you get out of that and, get your mind right in a sense, then it expands.
So, how did you get into spirituality?
Well, I was raised in the church. I was raised in the Christian church. I grew up in that my whole life. I was basically in like a Christian cult in a sense. Like, I don't know how familiar you are with the evangelical Christian movement here in the US, but it's a lot like a cult, very culty. Like, I was at church pretty much every day of the week, doing all sorts of stuff. I was involved in everything. And then when I was about 17, I started actually reading the Bible, and I realized that the words of Jesus didn't actually line up with what they were saying at church. That actually, this Jesus guy was pretty revolutionary. He had a lot of
Hmm.
crazy ideas that actually uh, weren't at all what my pastors or people at church were saying. So I found this like intrinsic difference there where I was like, man, I really dig this Jesus guy, and I still do. Still big fan of Jesus, but the Christians, they're full of shit, to be frank. Like, they believe in hell. Jesus doesn't even talk about hell. So that's just one of many examples. But so that kind of started everything. And then I left the church, and I began to become more of like an agnostic. I was more atheist in a sense. I wasn't an atheist, but definitely agnostic. And I went to college and studied philosophy, and then I got real deep into philosophy, and that became my religion in a sense. Was the religion of logic and so on.
Yes, logic and reason.
Yeah,
Yeah,
logic and reason, exactly, and
trying to
philosophy.
debunk people online, right?
Yeah, well, I really really love philosophy, and I really loved my time at college studying the ancient Greek philosophers
Right.
and so on. And but then I joined the army, and I ended up going to Germany, getting stationed in Germany for a couple years. And I had a really dark time, really hard time in the military for sure. And that's when I found out that I was on the autism spectrum. Was while I was in the army, basically, because I started having a lot of trouble. And it was the first time I'd ever really been exposed to
Right.
pressure and
So this
stress like that.
breakdown sort of effect,
Yeah.
even if it's horrible, does it actually aid awakening?
Absolutely. I feel like it's a natural thing. If you understand this idea of initiation, of cosmic initiation, you have to be initiated into these different understandings, this sort of awakened experience. And a lot of times people experience that initiation time as all of their whole life falling apart in a sense,
Oh,
and
yeah.
rebuilding, and kind of realizing like, oh, holy shit, I'm a soul trapped in a human body, and I create my reality. And when you realize that, it's almost like you get turned up a bit. Your frequency gets adjusted so that things are manifesting more quickly, and including bad things, really just
Oh,
to get
yeah.
you to realize what's going on. So that's what happened with me. Was I got really into psychedelic mushrooms, and
Oh,
I was doing a lot of that, hypothetically. And then and that really kind of got me back into what you would call spirituality, so
and
to
what
speak.
would that hypothetical experience be like?
Well, hypothetically, of course, speaking very it's of course a fictional story that I'm just using to impress people, quote,
Hmm.
wink wink. But hypothetically, it's very intense for sure. Psychedelic mushrooms are amazing. They totally changed my
And
life.
it's definitely spiritual.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. But again, I like that word. The word spiritual, I feel like, is very loaded. It's like it's not,
Okay, yeah.
you know what
How
I
do you
mean? It's not.
describe it? Transcendental?
No, I'd say wakes you up. It's a good way.
Oh, yeah.
Unplugging from the matrix, I guess, is a better phrase that I'd use. It's almost like realizing that, this is all this is all a video game in a
A
sense. But
cosmic
that's just
joke.
a huh?
Yeah, kids get it. They're playing
Yeah.
games all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's an understatement. Obviously life is a lot more complicated than Skyrim, or something. It's
Right.
obviously a lot more going on, but Skyrim is a good metaphor for kind of how this
What
all,
about
you know.
the vibration, spiritual vibrations that you can do with as a dragonborn?
Well, yeah, exactly. It's it's a lot like what might happen in magic or in different things. This idea that your voice has a lot of power, that your words have magical ability, so I started to realize a lot of this stuff through psychedelics, through studying, honestly. And this is what I've told a lot of people is like psychedelics are not a shortcut or anything like that. They're not yeah, they've really saved my life and changed my life many times over. And they're one of the most important influences, but they're not the be all end all of science and spirituality by any means. And in fact, I consider them more to be like a surgery, like it's like a going to have a psychic surgery, whereas meditation, for example, is the thing you should do every day to make sure you don't need surgery. So it's almost like, I think a lot of times people think these days like psychedelics are the be all end all of the spiritual experience, and they're
Okay.
not at all. not
What
at,
would you
not at all.
say if someone was forcing themselves to meditate every day? Would that be helpful, or would that not be helpful?
Well, I think meditation is great, but it's again just to start, and I think that if you have to, like you said, force yourself to meditate, that's a sign that there's probably something deeper going on, because meditation should be the easiest thing in the world. You're literally just sitting there silently breathing with your eyes closed. It's the easiest thing you can do is to lay down for 5 minutes with your eyes closed. So if someone can't do that, if someone's struggling with that, that's a sign that there's something a lot deeper going on, that there's
Right.
something really beneath the surface there that needs to come out. And that's where psychedelics might be useful to help you identify, like, what is that thing that needs to come out. But then you have to combine the two and sit with it. So I did a lot of that in my time in Germany. I got into meditation. I got into studying the law of attraction like crazy and all this
Hmm.
stuff. And yeah, it seemed to me at the time very spiritual, very connecting myself to my soul to the external world. But again, like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the more I go down this rabbit hole, the more I realize that what we call a spiritual experience is the actual experience. That is the true reality of what's going on here.
Right.
There is nothing. It's not like, okay, at some points in my life you're spiritual, and then you can turn the spiritual spirit thing off and go back to your day-to-day existence. Like, no, your day-to-day existence is supposed to be spiritual. It's all spiritual, if that makes
Right.
sense. Like, me recording this podcast here with you is a spiritual act in the
Yes.
same way, you know what I'm saying? Like, so
Yeah, definitely. And
yeah.
hypothetically, I might have had, suppose I were to have a not psychedelic experience of some kind. Suppose, what if that letting go that's so helpful in that sort of kind of situation? What if it's just as helpful in real life?
Yes,
Because it's all the
exactly.
same, right?
Yes, it's all the same. Like, it's all about surrendering, letting go, and so on. So that psychedelics brought me to learning more about the occult, learning more about
Hmm.
magic and stuff like that. So
So
I
on that
found
note, what can you say about, well, the occult, magic, and
so on.
alchemy?
Well, to start, just keep in mind that the word occult literally just means secret. It's phrased in our, especially me growing up in the Christian church, the word occult itself was like, don't even say that word, don't even
Mm,
think
mm.
about anything related to that topic. We weren't even allowed to know what it is that occultists believed, like, or what it is that they do. It wasn't, it's like, oh, just don't even think about any of that stuff. It's not, it's taboo. It's off top. It's off limits. So a lot of people were raised with that sort of belief or with that sort of thing. But I just want to say, just to start it off, that literally just means secret teachings, secret things in a sense. So there's different it's really just the idea that, again, there's a lot more going on to this reality than meets the eye. And when you can be initiated into this new understanding. And what I believe is, people use this term spiritual awakening these days, or, oh, I'm, experienced an awakening. What they're talking about is initiation. They're talking about what the ancient occult writers would call the initiatory experience. And that back in the day, thousands of years ago in ancient Egypt or Chaldea or Greece, this experience was facilitated. There were institutions you could go to, the mystery schools that you could go to be initiated and have the awakening experience. And that it was one of the most important things in the society, if not the most important thing, was,
Do you mean
you
like
know,
Delphi in the ancient Greece?
yeah, exactly. So the Delphi is a great example of such things. Or the mystery school that Pythagoras started in Greece is one that comes to mind as one of the most famous ones, I guess you could say. And these schools, these institutions existed all, I wouldn't say all over, but they were there. They're a central part of the society. And in fact, these were where the rulers were educated. These are where the priests were educated. Basically, anyone who was anyone inside of that society, they went through the mystery school. They were initiated. They had the awakening experience that we've had in a sense. So that's what I found researching the occult, researching all of this stuff is, and that was really one of my big aha moments was like, oh man, this is nothing new. Like we, especially here in 2021, we think that this is some sort of a big shift, that the stuff that you're on or that I'm on is new, or quantum physics. Like I was saying, quantum physics is thought of as new, right? It's a new thing that we're doing as humans. But actually, like I was saying, it's very old. It's the oldest thing that has ever happened. And now it's becoming more common because of the internet. More people are knowing about this stuff. You can buy ancient occult books off of Amazon. You know what I mean? Like
But
it's
the fact that you
information
can
is
buy
there.
occult books on Amazon, right? Is that not a sign that we're at a turning of the cycle?
Yeah,
Point.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like, yes, it's absolutely becoming more popular, more common, more well known, more talked about. But I guess what I'm saying is the teachings in general, the experience of awakening in general is one of the oldest teachings in the world. It goes
Right.
back, like you said,
Mm.
to supposedly to Atlantis 10,000 years ago, or who knows how long ago, you know? And for me, that's very comforting because I'm not crazy. You're not crazy. None of us who've had this experience are alone. We're all in this together. And again, the more I read, the more I realize like, okay, just about everyone who's anyone actually seems to have had some version of this experience where they wake up and realize like, oh wow, I create my reality. That's it's always, you've always created your reality. We as humans have always been emanating and creating our realities. It's just a matter of, are you aware? Have you been awakened or initiated into that understanding?
Right.
Does that
Fundamentally,
make
is
sense?
this initiation done? Do you start it? Does God start it? Was it both? Or is it someone else?
I've always experienced that it's you. You're the one who starts it. That you're the one who's initiating yourself. And even in the ancient mystery schools when they existed, it was always said that the initiate, the person who's desired initiation, would present themselves at the temple and they would say, "Here I am." Like no one would come recruiting them. You know what I mean? Like it was up to you to go to Pythagoras's mystery school and request initiation, and then you would be put through a series of ridiculous trials to see if you were worthy of receiving the sacred teachings, which is the teachings of initiation
And
in a
then what comes next after that?
well, I think it's ongoing. Like that's been my experience. Is
Right.
the initiation never stops. The awakening never stops. There's different levels. Like I thought at one point that I had I guess reached the pinnacle of what it meant to be conscious. And then the moment later, I realized like, oh no, I'm just getting started. And that's the other thing too, man. Like
Yeah.
we're so young. Like I do not know all the answers. The more I read, the more I study, the more I realize just how vast this ocean of knowledge is. And going back to this idea that it's a secret that's kind of kept by the universe, you start to realize just how many books there are on this topic. Like, for example, one of my favorite writers is Manly P. Hall. I've talked about him on my show a lot. And Manly Hall wrote 150 books. They're not little. They're big.
So
He is prolific. So what I'm saying is, and that's just one guy, and all
I'm
of his
curious
books are
though.
on this
I've heard
topic.
of him recently. He's been coming up not just with you recently in an almost synchronous way. So
That's what
if
I'm
you could
saying.
really briefly summarize, I know that's a lot to ask. What is it about?
It's about this topic. That's what I'm saying. It's about this. It's about everything I've been saying. Initiation. A lot of what I've explained to you on this show is stuff I've learned reading Manly Hall. You know what I mean? But I guess the reason I wanted to bring him up is just to say, like, he's got 150 books. They've been out there for 100 years. Like, he died in the at the end, I think in the 1990 or something like that. He died. He started writing him almost about 100 years ago. You know what I mean? So it's like, and he's just one of many, 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 many people who have written about this. So the fact that it's not widely known is just a testimony, in my opinion, of like just how much this information kind of is a secret of the universe or God or whoever. Because, like you said, once you start to become ready for this information, that's when all of a sudden Manly Hall seems to be coming up all over the place. And you're like, who's this fucking Manly Hall guy I've never heard about? And then you look into it and you're like, oh shit, he's got 150 books and 1,000 lectures on YouTube. Like, you could read Manly Hall till you're dead. You might not get through it all. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and he's just one writer, man. There's a
So,
lot. Does that make sense? Like,
oh
that's
yeah,
why
makes
it's
sense
so
to me. Yeah.
crazy.
So if a lot of people are becoming aware of these things, a lot more people awakening, has it got anything to do with the Mayan calendar?
What do you mean?
Well, everything
Oh, the
happens in
Mayan calendar.
cycles,
Yeah,
and
Mayan
you've
calendar.
mentioned that in your videos.
Yeah, well, again, I feel like the Mayans, they had just it's their own version of initiation. This idea of a Mayan calendar that charts your progression through different levels of consciousness. That the Mayans apparently said that there were 9 different levels of consciousness that a human being can go through. And that is allegedly what the Mayan calendar was charting. It was not the dates of time, but rather the evolution of consciousness of a human being. So this idea of there being different dimensions or different levels of consciousness is kind of what I was saying earlier, like back to your previous question of like, does the initiation ever stop? Like, no, it's ongoing. Like, just when you get, awakened or whatever into a new state of consciousness, a couple months later, you might find yourself in another one, you might, and I've experienced that a lot, where I've had some new epiphany or some new set of realizations that I feel just took it to a whole new level, and you've probably experienced the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I feel like, yeah, it's all connected. It's all one teaching. It's all one.
Well, it's all one.
Yeah, exactly.
The law of one, right?
Precisely. And the law of one is a great example. Another way that this information came out, through whatever they were doing there, channeling Bra, the sun god, so to speak, but yeah, it's all the same thing in a sense.
Okay, we've got another question. What's transurfing?
Transurfing. Well, there's this term that's going around right now called reality transurfing. And it's, something that you can Google. It's a, what's it called? Like, it's a search term, you know what I mean? Like, it's a commonly searched thing, reality transurfing. And that's what people are calling it these days. This idea of being able to kind of shift between realities, between dimensions, so that's kind of how I understand it or practice it, is this idea that you can shift between realities, that there's different dimensions that sit next to each other or on top of each other, and that you can exist between them or in different states,
Right.
and that really, if you're creating a new reality, in a sense, what you're trying to do is step into one of those other dimensions that exists beside the one that you're currently in. And in that dimension, things work different. But that's, again, kind of going back to quantum physics and how this all works from from a physical perspective,
because there's all these possibilities
yeah,
that collapse into like one, right?
yeah,
And then there's
exactly.
the idea that maybe we can consciously affect what that superposition collapse is, and that isn't that kind of transurfing anyway.
Yeah. So
And then
it's
the law of
like,
attraction applies to
yeah,
that too.
yeah. And that's kind of how it works, I think, is
Mm,
that, if you're manifesting a new reality, so to speak, what you might be doing, again, I'm not sure because this is just, just a couple years into studying this stuff. It's quite complicated from what I
mm.
can tell. And it's complicated, but it's simple and it's weird. But anyway,
Yeah.
what I'm saying is like, I think the way that it works, one of my hypotheses is that what you're doing when you're creating a new reality is you are stepping into that other dimension that already exists. Because if all of time exists and it's all happening now, and the universe is infinite and all possibilities are happening at all times and all places, then there's a reality right now where we're doing this podcast, but we're both sitting in a castle. There's a reality right now where we're doing this podcast, but you have a co-host. There's two people on your show. Or there's
Huh.
a reality right now, there's all these different realities that exist. There's a reality where you had laser eye surgery and you don't need glasses. And I didn't have laser eye surgery and I still need glasses. So I'm wearing glasses and you're not.
Or
And
there's
that's the
just
only
smaller
difference.
differences. Could we do it?
Yeah.
Is it like everyday things that are tiny that happen all the time?
Yeah. I think so. And then when you are trying to make this big shift in your life, like let's say start a new career or find your dream romantic partner or something, what you're doing is you're trying to step into that other reality, into that other dimension where you already have those things. Um so again, I'm not saying that this is the way it works 100%. I'm more saying this could be one of the ways manifestation, creating your reality kind of works, is that, there's all these different realities that exist and all we're doing in our day-to-day existence is shifting between these different existences.
Hmm. Do you
And
think
that
there are any
maybe,
misconceptions about it?
yeah, well, I think one of the main misconceptions is that this is how it works for sure. Like, no, it's a theory. It could be that it works that way, but it also could be not. I feel like, again, like I said, it's a hypothesis, something I've definitely been playing around with, thinking about a lot. But I don't think any of us can be sure right now. So I feel like that's the main misconception, is that, oh, I've met a lot of people these days, especially in the course of doing my podcast, where they're very sure. They're like, oh yeah, this is how it works for sure. And I'm like, man,
That's a
I don't
soul
know.
trip or something, right? Because
I don't know.
yeah, you get people in the outside world. Well, what do I say? The outside world. You get people who aren't into spirituality,
Yeah.
who they get this ideology, and they're like, it's all about this thing, right? And we do that too. It's easy to do it, and we need to maybe be less attached to any particular theory or way of doing things.
Yeah, exactly. For me, I've found that the things that there's things that I believe to be true, and then there's things that I'm sure about. There's things that I'm
Mm.
100% sure, and then there's other things where I'm thinking, okay, maybe that's how it works. But some of the things that I feel very confident and very sure about is magnetism. This idea that we are magnetically, that there's magnetic currents that we access, that we utilize to emanate and create our reality. And that's been my experience for the most part, is like that's effective,
It's
is
that
that,
polarity.
yes, exactly, that moving along a polarity is very effective. However, I guess what I'm meaning is, if we're talking tactically, because especially as a occultist, that's how I like to think, is that, in other words, what I'm saying is, these teachings, these things need to be useful. They have to have a tactical value. So for me, what I've found tactically to work very well is this idea of transmutation, like you said,
Yeah.
transmuting your base self into your highest self, and basically changing the lesser desirable states of yourself into something that is better, you know, changing your fear into courage, for example. Like
Mm.
when you make that physiological shift within yourself, it changes. Your reality shifts. You experience life completely differently. So I've experienced that so much to feel like I know that's true, at least for me, at least for how I work. You know, that's 100% true for me. Why it works, you know, the why, as to like why does it work that when you shift your internal states it emanates a new reality, that's still up for debate. You know, that's still uh you know, whether it's we're shifting between dimensions, or it's that okay, it's all one dimension and you've shifted it and you've changed it in a sense. That's where there's still a lot to be discovered, you know. But I
Mm.
guess in other words, put differently, I'm 100% sure that this stuff is real and it works. But why does it work? That's the big question, you know.
Yeah, and even if you found out why, maybe there could be a deeper way of understanding that
Yeah.
at a later point in time, or whatever that means. So, what about magic? Is that something you've looked into? Is
Yes, a lot.
that
Magic,
white magic?
yes. But they're the same. You know, magic is
Light magic,
yeah.
which could be dark or bright.
There just is magic in my opinion.
Mm.
And it's the use of it that constitutes whether it's white magic or black magic or whatever you want to call it. The
Yeah.
right hand path or the left hand path as they're called, you know. And at the end of the day, it's again the a lot of times people who are experimenting with magic, they're accidentally doing black magic and they just don't realize it. I was accidentally doing black magic for a long time. I didn't realize it because I didn't understand what black magic or magic
So,
was,
what's
you
the
know.
difference?
Really what I found is anything that you're doing to uh everything white magic is the path of being a quote unquote white magician or whatever you want to call it, is using these practices only for yourself, only for spiritual growth, for gaining what they call the knowledge and conversation of your holy guardian angel, or your higher self is another way to think about it. So in other words, the only purpose of white magic is to turn you into a better instrument and to make
Right,
you a
right.
better tool through through meditation, through communication with your higher self. And the rituals, so to speak, are just in other words, invoking yourself, you know, talking to you, talking to the highest part of yourself
Right.
and gaining that the knowledge and conversation. So in other words, having a direct communication with God, in other words, or having and being able to gain information from that.
So is
That
trying
is
to
the
help
path of,
people with magic
no, that is the path.
actually dark magic?
Yes, that's what I'm
Oh,
saying.
fuck.
So
Right. That makes
that's what I'm saying. So
wow.
in other words, anything that has to do with someone else, black magic.
What
If
even
in my
healing?
opinion, well,
Is Reiki black magic?
if you have their consent, then no. That's kind of where there's also what they call gray magic, which is kind of in between, and that's really kind of what you're getting at. Is that's why consent is so important. So, for example, if
Right.
you are engaging in a work of healing through energy, like in Reiki or something like that, it's very important that you ask the person, "Do I have your consent to touch you, to work on you energetically?" And if the answer is yes, then it's gray magic. It's kind of in the middle in a sense. But no, it's not white magic because white magic is just you. If there's anyone else involved, then it's either black magic or gray magic, is my understanding. Gray magic
Huh.
is, you know, it's gray, it's neutral, it's in the middle, you know, it's complicated. Whereas black magic would be okay, you're a Reiki healer and you're going to send someone your Reiki energy and you didn't ask them. That's black magic.
Ah, right.
Yeah. Because
Wow. I mean,
that's
a lot of people
violating.
can do that by accident. Definitely.
That's what I'm saying. And I was one of those people. Most people are. But what you realize is there's a karmic backlash. It might be small, but it's a backlash. So, for
Huh.
example, if you're trying to do something energetically for another person and it's against their consent, it's not what they want, you're violating their consent. So, for example, you're talking about healing. This is why it's so important. A lot of people don't want to be healed. A lot of people, they're sick for their own purposes. So there's something that they need to learn through that sickness. This is something
Right.
Manly Hall writes about a lot. Manly Hall actually has a book called Magic, which is all about this topic, which is a great book on this. But talks about this idea that, we're all spirits, we're all souls having this human experience. There's reasons why our souls are doing things, so if someone is sick, for example, might be because their spirit is trying to learn something
So
through
you
that
might be
sickness.
interfering with that.
They need it for whatever reason, and it's not up to you or me
Right.
to say,
Right.
oh, that person should be better, I'm going to heal them. No,
Who
it's
are
up to
you
them.
to decide that as well? Like,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, but then that's why it's important to ask. If you ask them and you say, hey, would you like me to use my Reiki abilities to heal you? And they say yes. What they're saying is their spirit is then saying, okay, I'm ready for healing. I'm ready. I don't need this anymore. And now it's different. It's completely different because now you're helping them do something. And again, if you're a Reiki healer or whatever you want to call it, if you do give them some healing through that, you're not the healer. You're just the conduit for their own healing. They need you for whatever reason to be a third party. So that way it does something for them where they're like, okay, I've been healed because I had this Reiki session. When actually they can heal themselves. We can all heal ourselves, through these practices. You don't need anyone else, but a lot of times we can hold space for each other because that's how humans are wired.
okay.
In the same way that you might take a medicine, you don't necessarily need medicine, but it does something when you take it that triggers something inside of you that says, I'm healed, and then
Right.
it does it. You know
And
what I mean?
eventually we won't need that
Yeah,
because,
eventually, but we're still there, and that's okay. I'm still there.
yeah.
I'm, it's not I'm not saying, again, I'm not trying to say like, oh, people shouldn't take medicine. Like, no, it's more just uh I believe that's how it works. And the reason I believe it is because I've experienced it a lot, I've
Right. So
experienced it.
you did an interesting video about saving the world and what, so, yeah, and he talked about how we have the responsibility to do it ourselves and stuff like that. So, is there anything you'd like to outline about that?
Yeah, honestly, that's something I've shifted in my beliefs a lot, and
Oh,
I've
okay.
changed my tone on the podcast a lot lately. And this is gonna sound, I what I found is that it's not up to you or me to save the world necessarily. We can't, because what I found is that leads to being this hero complex, this idea that,
Mm,
you're the
mm,
savior of mankind. Everyone should listen to you because you've got the secret plan to save the world. And at the end of the day, I have my own secret plan to save the world in my own way, but it's for me. It's, I've found is that it's really good to be the example, to set the example of what
right.
it should look like. But if other people don't join up with the cause, that's because they're still on their own path. Again, it's like that's kind of what I realized, and that's where I again kind of shifted my tone. It's like it's not up to me to save the world. It's up to people to save themselves. You know what
Right.
I
But
mean?
what do you think? Would you encourage people to do their bit
Yeah, of
to
course. Of course.
build a new world bit by bit? The
Yeah,
new
but I
earth,
think it
right?
it starts with you. It starts with you. And it's that old phrase of like, I forget where this quote came from, but it's like, I wanted to save the world, so I decided I got to first save my country. And then to save my country, I realized I have to save my region. And to save my region, I realized I have to save my city. And to save the city, I realized I have to save the neighborhood. And to save the neighborhood, I realized I first have to save my family. And to save my family, I realized I have to save myself. And that's where it all
Right.
goes
Yeah.
back to is at the end of the day, it's you. You've got to fix you, and when you become the very best version of yourself and you start living it and walking your truth and doing it, doing the things you're supposed to be doing, like you're recording this podcast.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Everyone should be recording podcasts or doing whatever it is
Yeah.
their creative thing is, but it's not up to you. Like if you didn't have a podcast and you just walked around all day telling everyone else how they should be doing a podcast, people be like, fuck this guy. Why doesn't he start a podcast? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And that's where people are a lot. It's like they're just talking. They're saying, oh, we should be doing this. We should be doing that. We should be like, no,
Or they're
like,
following, right?
yeah, or
And
they're
they're not
following.
actually following their intuition, but rather being dictated to by others or allowing themselves to, in any case.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's again, it's like, okay, going back to what you said, I do really feel like, yes, it's our responsibility to fix this planet, to quote unquote save the world. But on the other hand, I don't think the world needs saving, honestly. We're the ones who are fucked up a lot of times.
So
The
how do
the
we integrate the two?
Yeah, the monkeys and the whales and the dolphins and the snow leopards, yes, they could use our support, but at the end of the day, the best thing we can do is probably just leave them alone and let them do their thing.
Right.
Nature is its own. Nature is taking care of nature, and if we get in the way, nature might fuck us up through a hurricane or something
Yeah.
like that. But nature, like, we're the ones who've got to catch up.
So,
The world
right.
need us to save it. We got to save ourselves so that way we can then go and enjoy this world
Yeah,
that's
that makes
already
sense.
there.
You've got to sort the shit out. And if you
Yeah,
sort the shit out, like everything will act better and we'll meet other people who are ready to meet us and vice versa. And all
yeah,
there'll be a divine plan that manifests more and more the more we just let it and
right.
let go of all the stuff that doesn't serve.
And what I've found is that there is, in a sense, a uh, secret world there. That there's two worlds, and again, there always have been. There's these two different paths. Like, that's what's metaphorically referred to in the Kabbalah. This idea of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That
Mm.
there's two paths. You choose which tree to eat from. You can choose the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is the path of suffering, or you can choose to eat from the tree of life, which is the path of life and
Is the
love.
tree of good and evil a tree of duality?
I think so. Yeah, I believe
And the
so.
tree of unity, yeah,
The
just
tree
as
of
in
life.
another sense, perhaps there's the spiritual energetic level, and then there's just the mere material.
Yeah, exactly. I believe so. So when you choose to step into that on and you say, okay, I'm done with hell, I'm done with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, I've learned everything I need to learn from suffering, now it's time to learn from joy, now it's time to learn from love, and through this communion with God, but God really just being, all of creation, in other words, where and when you are on that path and you choose that way of living your life, everything shifts, and it's almost like what I've been trying to tell people is, and what me and a lot of my friends have been discussing, is that the way the world is going right now, none of us think that any sort of a revolution or anything would be productive. Like, look at what happened in the United States here last year when they had this storming the Capitol. I don't know if you heard about that, but like
Yeah.
bunch of quote unquote patriots storming the Capitol building to stick it to the man. Like, it's not productive. Like, nothing
Right.
got done. It actually makes things a lot worse. People just think you're
And
crazy.
it happened on both sides as well,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Insofar
Nothing
as
gets done.
sides even means anything.
It doesn't accomplish anything. There's
Yeah.
nothing that actually changed as a result. And at the end of the day, people got hurt. People looked like idiots. It's not, on the one hand, like, yeah, I see the fight of, the fight for freedom is, of course, the fight worth fighting. But on the other hand, I've found it's the way to achieve freedom and stuff is almost this idea of disconnecting, of just not participating, of just saying I'm on a different path. I exist in a different reality than whatever is going on, with you guys, in a sense. And that when you're doing that, it's a lot more productive. And again, it sets the example that, like, this is possible, that you don't have to energetically participate in
Right.
what's going on.
Maybe instead of the idea that we can materially make something better, maybe we can focus on energetically making something better, starting with ourselves. And
Yep.
if we all do that, like everything will change. Right.
Yes. And here's the thing. Everything, and this, again, going back to how this is all a deep rabbit hole and, nothing new. What you just said, that is the teaching. That's what's called in the occult, the great work. Like, you can look it up, Google
Hmm.
the great work. People have been writing about that concept that you just said for thousands of years. That is the idea, is that yes, when you energetically shift yourself and when you learn how to work with energy through magic or meditation or whatever you want, whatever practice you have for working with energy, that's what you're doing. So you are making that shift. So for example, what I believe is that just you and me having this conversation, it makes an impact from a vibrational perspective. So just the vibration that goes out as a result of us having this conversation, it has an impact. So you might, hypothetically, like, I don't know if are you in an apartment
No,
or
I'm at home.
you're at home? Okay, so
Well, what
let's
does that
say,
mean? Home would be an apartment.
yeah, it's true. But
I'm with my mum at the moment because
okay,
it's practical
I guess
reasons.
what I'm saying, do you have neighbors like
Yeah.
right now? Like hypothetically, you might, go talk to a neighbor later and find out that they're having similar sorts of epiphanies that we might be having on this conversation.
Yeah, it's behind closed doors a lot of the time.
Yeah,
We don't know what's going on.
right, exactly. So your neighbor could be recording their own podcast right now, talking about this something. So I guess what I'm saying is this conversation we're having is probably being had all over the world right now in different forms, in all different languages. That's what I feel is
That's
that
fantastic. And you're feeling it energetically.
yes, yes, I feel like this conversation is happening little by little by little by little, and just by you and me having it, even if this podcast hypothetically never got aired to anyone, if no one ever heard this conversation, it would still make a big difference. It would still have that shift. Obviously, if you post it online and 100,000 people listen to it, obviously it has more of an impact vibrationally because now more people have received it. But hypothetically, even if no one ever heard this conversation, it would still have a significant impact. It would still be a massive impact on the world because what's happening right now is you and me, again, we're different parts of God who are having this conversation. Right
Mm.
now, we're like different parts of, imagine the whole universe as a brain, and you and me are different neurons in that giant brain. And right now we're trying to figure out how we think, how we feel about these topics, right? We're trying to figure out, like, okay, let's compare ideas, let's compare findings in the name of, moving this all forward. And
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing, but it's the same sort of thing that's happening in my brain whenever I'm trying to make a decision. Different parts of different neurons in my brain fire, and then there's a conversation that happens in your head to try to decide something.
Yeah, as
So
above, so below. And it
I
comes
was
down to how
literally
we make
about to say
decisions.
that. It's
Oh,
literally
great.
about to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And how we make decisions. Do we follow intuition? Do we flow? Or do
Yeah.
we try to make something happen? Like, it's up to us. And I suppose maybe that is simply what the great work is.
Yeah, I think so. And then also I believe impacting the next generation and the like, okay, and the generations that came before. Like, okay, here's an example of something I found. So when I was in Germany, I didn't have the ability to talk to my parents as much because I was overseas. So we would talk a little less often than we do now. Because we could only talk through, Skype or something. I couldn't just call them. And at the time, yeah, I had gotten into meditation and I've been meditating a lot, like every day, and I hadn't told my parents. They didn't know that I was into meditation, and then I talked to my dad, maybe, a couple months after I've been getting into meditation, found out he also had gotten into meditation on his own accord.
And that's a
He
good.
also, he also has been meditating. And, and we, turns out I had been the first to start meditating, but even without me having to say anything to him, somehow, coincidentally, he also stumbled into meditation and
It
began
wasn't a
doing it.
coincidence, though, was it?
That's what I'm saying. It's not, but
It's energetic. And our connections, maybe what we do, the people, it flows to other people we're energetically connected to.
Yes.
or emotionally connected to, which isn't really any different.
Yes.
And
That's
so,
what I think.
yeah, that's why I've come across this idea a number of times and I'm increasingly understanding it. And it's just this idea of, yeah, focus on ourselves. And it sounds selfish, doesn't it?
But it's not.
Hmm.
It's not. It's not selfish. It's because when you turn yourself into a better tool and you become more useful to the world, you can help more people. You know, like you can like something I've been working on the last year is podcast powertrain, the business that I've been working on running with Zach Babcock, my business partner. And we've created like 30 jobs in the last year. And
Cool.
that feels amazing. It helps. We've helped a lot of people, but we've done it quiet, relatively quietly. I mean, I'm not even on social media anymore. And Zach, my business partner, is hardly on. He's, infrequent. What I'm saying is like, we're not out there parading like, oh, this is what we're doing, like, but it's real, uh, it is happening quietly, and I found that that's a lot more productive is to operate silently and quietly, to be almost undercover in what we're doing here, because it's not necessary for us to speak about it all the time because again it's internal, and when you speak, when you share, like when we're communicating these ideas, it makes it stronger, but it has to be at certain points because you know that's why I think it's so important for this idea of consensus, this idea of agreeing, and these days I like to, if we're talking about working energetically, if I'm going to give my energy to someone, I want it to be someone where I know that we're going to we're going to agree more than we're going to disagree, because I don't really want to argue with people. It's not up to me to try to convince someone of these things. Like when I was a Christian, that was the whole message is you got to save everyone. You got to be evangelical. You got to share everything, talk to everyone about Jesus and convince everyone. These days, no, I don't think that at all. I think no. If someone believes something else different than me, cool. That's real for them in
Yeah.
their universe where they're sovereign and they get to create their reality. They believe in that. Okay, sweet. Who am
You're
I to
just,
convince them
yeah,
that
you
they're
just got your
wrong?
voice and they've got theirs. And
Yeah.
if you express it, why not? But
Yeah.
you're
So these
not.
days,
Hmm.
I like to, I don't, when you asked me to be on your show, I'm happy to do it because I love these conversations, but I feel like this is productive, talking about these things because we're growing, we're expanding, we're increasing that vibrational wavelength that's going out all over the world right now, sharing this information invisibly without you or me even doing anything. Obviously, when you or me do actually do something, it becomes more powerful, becomes more real. Um, so it's I guess what I'm saying to bring it all back to your original question about saving the world is that it's like yes and no. On the one hand, yes, we are responsible for doing everything we can to improve this reality. But on the other hand, someone else they might have some sort of experience or something that their spirit, their soul is trying to do, and they've chosen this path. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Who am I to say, oh, you're wrong? That's you shouldn't be doing that. Like, no, I can only work on myself. And when I work on myself, as if by magic, it seems that, everyone else improves too, you
Yeah.
know?
And I guess that is what really matters. And, I think that's a great note to end this episode because, yeah, I mean, it's a really positive message. And yeah, I've
I
enjoyed
try,
this
man.
conversation.
And again, I mean, I just want to say, like, overall, yes, like we are responsible. But yes, it is up to us to improve this place. But one of my ayahuasca experiences, my first ayahuasca session, I asked the ayahuasca spirit, I said, like, are we doomed? Like, are we gonna make it? Are we humans gonna, fuck up this planet? And ayahuasca was like this spirit laughed, and it's like, you silly human, like that's such a human thing to think that you even could, is what she said, like that we would even let you fuck this place up. It's like, how laughable. what a human that we would let the monkeys screw up the place, and that really is what I think is happening. There's higher powers at work here that we are only now beginning to understand, and that, again, really it's higher versions of yourself operating at different dimensions of consciousness that you're still learning to even comprehend. So there's a lot here that's going on, but at the end of the day, it is your responsibility to transmute yourself and to get better. But that doesn't have to be a evangelical process. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
yeah, thanks so much for having me, man.
All right. Yeah. And I'm open to doing it again if you are.
Of course. Absolutely.
All right, then. Well, you have a great day. And same to you listeners. I hope you got something out of this
I hope
episode.
so too. And I just released a new episode of Beyond Homo Sapien yesterday. So if you guys, and there was a lot about this topic on that show. So go check it out, Beyond Homo Sapien. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me.
Bye, everyone.